Critical information literacy, step 2. Step 2 tells us that truth is only step 1. And in this case, we want to help students move from users to critical users. So instead of just trying to find information that is true or not true, and that's it, we want to help them think more critically about the information that they find, knowing that it's not just about truth. So getting back to our sites from before, martinlutherking.org is a site that you'll probably recognize fairly quickly as being problematic. And this site has a lot of true information. Now, I haven't researched it all. I can't tell you whether it's 100% true, but I can tell you that a lot of it is true, and possibly all of it. And for the sake of argument, let's say that all of it is true. Everything on the site is true, and yet it's still problematic. So we need to get our students to be critical users, to not just say, oh, this is true, so let's use it, but say, oh, this is true, but it's still problematic. And as critical users, our goal then is to make a yes-no judgment about our sites. Keep the good, throw out the bad. This goes beyond just truth. So martinlutherking.org, for the sake of argument, we're saying it's 100% true, but we still want to throw it away. We still want to make a no judgment because it's still a bad site. It's still very problematic. So checklists seem to be okay for this. They're not always great because they have some mixed results. So as we look at the 5 W's on the martinlutherking.org site, we see who. Well, it doesn't give you a lot of good information about who wrote this information, so it doesn't do so well with who. Then we look at what. What does the author say is the purpose of the site, and etc. And it seems like it says that pretty well, so give it a check mark for what. You may look a lot deeper, certainly deeper than most of your students will look, and find some problems in the what section, but overall, what seems to be okay. When seems problematic. It doesn't have a date, but I would argue that that's really irrelevant in this case. We're dealing with something historical, so it doesn't really matter that we have no date on there because it's recent enough. If we're talking about a real current issue like the situation in the Ukraine that changes all the time, or the situation in the Middle East, then something even 2 years old is outdated. But in this case, from something in the 60s, it's probably not a problem that we don't have a date. Then where does the information come from? It seems like there's some citations on this site, a lot of good information about where the information comes from. So I think that we're okay with where. And why obviously has to do with the purpose that you're using the information for, but assuming that you're trying to get information about Martin Luther King Jr., then it's a good site for why. So we got three check marks and 2 X's, so it's not even clear, and one of the X's we discarded, so it's not even clear what we should do with a site like this based on the checklists. So here's another site, and this is the Institute for Historical Review. Now, this site has been changing over time, so if you go there now, it won't look exactly like this. But this site is another site with a lot of factual information on it. And this site is a little bit different from the previous site, because the previous site, with a fairly quick glance, you're going to find a lot of problematic stuff. Certainly as an adult, though your students maybe not. But as an adult, you'd find a lot of problematic stuff, and you'd be finding things that you'd think aren't true that may actually be true, but they would raise red flags for you, and we'd certainly understand why are they emphasizing those things. But here on the Institute for Historical Review, it's a different story. At the Institute for Historical Review, it's a fairly professional site. You're very unlikely to find typographical errors, to find the information to be disorganized, to find anything that's flat out false. So this is a site that couches itself in academic terms. So as we look at this site with our checklist, we find Who? It gives great information about who wrote all this information. You can probably find biographies of the people. You can find a lot of good information. What? It clearly states what the purpose of the site is, when the site has dates on it, so you know what's current and when it was created. Where does the information come from? Lots of citations. And why, again, if we're looking for a different viewpoint on some historical topics such as the Holocaust, we might find that this is useful for our purpose. So IHR.org, 5Ws, gets 5 check marks for that. And yet, this site is still problematic because the main purpose of this site is to prove to you that the Holocaust didn't happen, or at least didn't happen in the way that you think it happened. And so this is a very problematic site, but it clearly and easily passes our 5Ws checklist. And here's another one of my favorite sites. Unfortunately, this site no longer exists, or we might say fortunately. This site is Black Invention Myths. And this site, the content is still around, but not quite in as good a format as it used to be. Most of the content that you can find on the web related to this is now couched in some pretty inflammatory terms, so you would know pretty quickly that it's a problem. But the original site was very good, very well put together, had a lot of great information about Black invention myths. And the idea is it's information about inventions to tell us about what really happened with these inventions that are credited to African Americans. And for example, there are some information about, did George Washington Carver actually invent peanut butter? And the answer actually is no. And I know a lot of you are teaching your students that George Washington Carver invented peanut butter, but factually that's wrong, not just based on this site. So the question they're trying to lead you to, did George Washington Carver invent peanut butter? And then they're also asking the question, implicitly, not explicitly, is George Washington Carver a fraud? And so they clearly want to tell you, and they clearly explicitly answer the first question as no. George Washington Carver did not invent peanut butter. And they're clearly, though not explicitly, trying to lead you to a yes answer for the second question, is George Washington Carver a fraud? And that's their goal. So as we look at the 5Ws, who, this site was only so-so. It gave you the name of the person, but it was hard to find information, so kind of a question mark there. What, it clearly stated a purpose about dispelling some of the myths about inventions and giving you some factual information, which it does. Again, I haven't researched that site in great detail, but the research that I have done, it's pretty factual. Everything that I found is actually true. When it doesn't have dates, but again, this is historical information, so it's not clear that that's all that important. Where it had great citations, and that's another problem with the newer sites. The newer sites that have this same content don't have the citations that were available on this site. And why they make clear that as you're looking for information about inventions, you might want to go here. And in fact, you might want to go here as long as you look at it with the appropriate filter, because there's actually a lot of good information about inventions here. So the question is, what's wrong with the Black Invention Myths site? So we're going to pause here and let you ponder this question.